Okay, so you want to talk self-sufficiency. Like, really make your garden count.
More than just a hobby, right? We're talking backup plan,
Yeah.
and the sources you sent, they get that.
Totally. So get this. Potatoes, beans, tomatoes,
A classic.
corn, cabbage, and squash. We go deep on those, you'll be set. Not just how to grow them, but why they're like the survivalist's best friend.
Strategic allies.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. And speaking of, the potato often gets overlooked.
But not today. The source mentioned you can grow these guys anywhere, practically. Containers, bags.
It's just key, right? Apartment dwellers, small yards, you could still get in on this.
Exactly. And it's not just filling space. It's good food. Carbs, vitamin C, potassium.
They're surprisingly well-rounded. And the storage, don't even get me started.
Oh, tell me about it. Some types, if you store them right, they last for months. Months. Imagine that, your own potatoes all winter.
Cuts down on those grocery bills for sure. And speaking of different types, the source got into Rosette potatoes.
For baking, right. And fries.
Spot on. Then there's Clin, those are your creamy mashed potato stars.
Yeah.
And of course, red potatoes for your salads and stews.
So you could have a whole potato party with that lineup. But here's a curveball the source mentioned, hilling. Ever heard of that?
Oh, absolutely. It's a classic technique. Basically, you mound up soil around the plant stems as they grow.
Okay, so what's the point of giving them a little dirt fort?
Two big things. Boost your yield, so you get more potatoes.
I like the sound of that already.
And it stops them going green and bitter from too much sun. So, simple trick, big payoff.
Smarter, not harder, I always say. Okay, enough about spuds. Let's talk beans. They're like the quiet achievers of the garden.
Unassuming, but mighty.
Yeah.
Black beans, pinto beans, lima beans, so much variety. And for your soil, they're absolute rock stars.
Because they're legumes, right? Explain it like I'm five. What's so special about that?
Okay, so legumes, they've got this superpower. They team up with certain bacteria in the soil.
Teamwork makes the dream work.
And these bacteria, they pull nitrogen out of the air, but here's the kicker, they turn it into a form that plants can actually use, like their own little fertilizer factory.
Wait, so you're saying by planting beans, I'm basically fertilizing my garden for free?
Pretty much. Less reliance on store-bought stuff, better for the environment, and you get delicious beans. Win-win-win.
Sign me up. And speaking of good stuff, the source mentioned, beans are packed with protein.
Oh, for sure. If you're trying to cut back on meat or just want more plant-based protein in your diet, beans are your new best friend.
Okay, I'm sold on beans. Now let's talk about something that just screams summertime tomatoes. And I don't know about you, but a homegrown tomato just hits different.
Night and day from the supermarket. The source was all about that intense flavor you get from a vine-ripened tomato.
Plus all those vitamins and antioxidants, vitamins A and C, potassium, lycopene. It's like a health food in disguise.
It's true. And the variety. Tiny cherry tomatoes, big juicy beefsteaks, whatever your heart or your recipe desires.
See, that's what I love about gardening. Speaking of variety, next up is corn. And I'm not just talking about a side dish here. This is a crop with history, with culture.
It's true. For centuries, corn has been a symbol of abundance, of prosperity. The source we were looking at really emphasizes the feeling of satisfaction you get from growing your own corn, like you're tapping into something bigger than yourself.
I can see that. Okay, quick detour into history, the Three Sisters planting method. Native Americans, right? Corn, beans, squash, all grown together. Tell me that isn't genius.
It's incredible, and it makes perfect sense when you think about it. The corn stalks act as natural poles for the beans to climb.
Built-in trellis.
Exactly. And we know beans are nitrogen fixers, so they're actually enriching the soil for the corn and the squash.
It's like they all bring something to the party.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then the squash, with its big leaves, acts as a living mulch, keeping the soil cool and moist and suppressing weeds.
Talk about a power trio. Okay, shifting gears a bit. Let's talk about cabbage. Now, this is a crop that really shines when it comes to long-term storage, which is a big deal for anyone thinking about prepping or just wanting to make their harvest last.
Absolutely. And let's not forget, cabbage is a nutritional powerhouse. Vitamin C and K, fiber, folate.
Yeah.
It's got it all.
You had me at vitamin C, but how do you store cabbage for months on end? Do I need to dig a cellar?
A root cellar is fantastic if you have the space, but for most people, a cool, dark, and slightly humid spot in your basement will do, or even the refrigerator. But here's a fun fact. The source also mentioned fermented foods like sauerkraut.
Sauerkraut, that's a game changer.
Right. Fermenting your cabbage not only makes it last even longer, but it also adds beneficial probiotics, which are fantastic for gut health. So you're basically getting two for the price of one. Longer storage and a boost for your gut.
That's what I call a win-win. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here, but we have one more superstar crop to tackle: squash. And just like cabbage, squash is a storage champion, especially those winter varieties like butternut, acorn, and spaghetti squash.
You said it. Those hard rinds are the key. They're like nature's packaging, keeping all that sweet, delicious flesh inside, fresh and flavorful for months.
And let's not forget about the seeds. Roasted squash seeds are like a bonus harvest, a tasty, nutritious snack packed with protein and healthy fats. It's like the gift that keeps on giving.
Absolutely. And squash is so incredibly versatile in the kitchen. Sweet or savory dishes, soups, stews, even pies. You name it, there's a squash recipe for it.
See, this is what I love about gardening. It sparks so much culinary creativity.
It really is like having a whole world of flavors right there in your backyard.
That's it.
And going through all this, it really highlights how growing even just some of your own food, it changes things.
100%. It's like you said before, it's bigger than just, oh, I'll survive. It's a whole different way of living.
Yeah.
And let's be real, grocery prices lately, gardening starts to look pretty good.
It's true. It's like you're taking back some control, right? You're not at the mercy of whatever's happening in the world.
Yeah.
And beyond that, there's just this satisfaction, to grow something from a tiny seed and then it's on your plate. It connects you to nature in a way that's hard to describe.
No, I totally get it. Remember that farm-to-table restaurant we went to? The food just tasted different somehow.
Absolutely. Fresher, more flavorful.
And this is like next level farm-to-table. It's your farm right outside.
Exactly. Okay, but to bring it back, we've talked about these 6 crops.
Yeah.
Potatoes, beans, tomatoes,
We're heavy hitters.
corn, cabbage, and squash. They're adaptable, they're packed with nutrients, they store well. It's like the self-sufficiency starter pack.
And don't forget, they make your soil healthier. You need less fertilizer. It's like working with nature, not fighting against it.
Exactly. But I have to admit, even I get a little overwhelmed sometimes. Thinking about starting a garden, it can feel like a lot.
Where do you even begin, right?
Exactly. But here's the thing. You don't have to do it all at once. You don't need acres of land or years of experience. You can start small. Maybe just 1 or 2 of these crops that really speak to you.
So start small, don't get overwhelmed.
And remember, gardening is a journey. It's not a race. There'll be good times. There'll be times you mess up.
Eh.
That's how you learn.
It's about the process.
Exactly. Don't be afraid to experiment, to try new things. You might surprise yourself with what you can achieve.
I love that. Now, you mentioned earlier about these crops working together. We talked about the Three Sisters method, but do you know anything about companion planting?
Oh, absolutely. It's fascinating, really. It's all about how certain plants can actually help each other grow.
Right, like planting basil next to your tomatoes to keep pests away, or tucking some lettuce in between rows of veggies that take longer to grow.
Exactly. It's about maximizing space and resources. And ultimately, you're creating this thriving little ecosystem in your garden where everything works together.
So instead of just planting things in straight rows, you're thinking about the garden as a whole, like how everything interacts.
Exactly. It's a more holistic approach.
Yeah.
And to be honest, it's a lot more fun. You're like a garden detective figuring out what works best.
I love that. Okay, but stepping back for a second, it makes you realize how much our relationship with food has changed.
Totally. Nowadays, it's easy to forget that food doesn't just magically appear on grocery store shelves.
Right. Especially with everything that's been happening lately, supply chain issues, climate change, growing your own food, even just a little bit, it's like this act of rebellion almost.
It is. It's about taking back control, becoming more self-reliant. You're not just depending on this big system that you have no control over.
It's like you're building a safety net, but instead of catching you when you fall, it's a pantry full of fresh food that you grew yourself.
Exactly. And it's an investment that pays off in so many ways, right?
Yeah.
Your health, your well-being, even your peace of mind.
People talk about investing in their future, but this is about as real as it gets.
I agree. And the best part is you don't need some fancy financial advisor. A little bit of dirt, some seeds, and you're good to go.
It's true. It's not like you need to be a Wall Street wizard to grow a tomato.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into these 6 essential crops, potatoes, beans, tomatoes, corn, cabbage, and squash, what's standing out to you, what are you thinking of trying in your own garden? It's funny you should ask that because I was just thinking the same thing. For me, it's that companion planting idea that really grabbed my attention. Creating those little plant neighborhoods where everything's working together. It just seems so smart. Like we really can learn from nature.
Totally. It keeps coming back to that working with nature instead of trying to control everything, instead of just rows of plants. It's like you're building a little ecosystem.
Yeah,
Makes it stronger, more productive.
exactly. And more fun, honestly.
Yeah.
Instead of just planting and hoping for the best, you're like a detective, figuring out how to make these plants thrive together.
Love that. So there you have it, folks. Your crash course in food security starring 6 amazing crops. These aren't just plants. They can change your garden, your plate, maybe even your whole outlook.
And remember, this is just the beginning. Gardening, there's always something new to learn. So get out there, get those hands dirty, and start growing something amazing.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Until next time, happy gardening, everyone.